Big defensive line moves for the Texas Longhorns in 2026 recruiting. We're going to talk about it. Cody, we had just today, Jason Sukamel over at Orange Bloods confirmed that Jamarian Carlton out of Temple, the defensive end, defensive line, edge rusher, is now canceling his official visit to Texas A&M on the very exact same day that Rivals national analyst Sam Spiegelman goes ahead and puts in a future cast to Texas. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are it is in line with everything that we kind of heard coming out of the weekend that Jason was reporting. This week it's been big, couple of interesting cancellations, especially amongst the rival schools, with Felix Ojo canceling his Oklahoma one earlier this week, and then Carlton now today canceling this one. He also has Baylor on the block for June 20th, but that was not something that was confirmed to be canceled. But the big fish, or the big competitor in the Jamarian Carlton sweepstakes, was 100% Texas A&M for Texas. So it's pretty big. And to me, everything points to now Texas kind of being 100% in the front seat, the driver's seat for Jamarian Carlton, the 46th ranked player in America, the number 4 edge rusher in America.
And he's good, man. And the title of the show is building the top defensive line class in the country, and they're going after the Richard Wesleys of the world. I'm gonna have in my call, or in the war room on Thursday, some notes from a Power 4 recruiting director about the 2 defensive tackles that Texas has brought in so far, Dylan Barryman and Wells from Petal, Mississippi, and sort of his thoughts, his sophomore, junior evals on these guys. Don't necessarily agree with all of them, but certainly these are 2 guys that were on a lot of people's radars. And what I wrote today, we'll get into here in a second, is how they can fill out this defensive line class to make it one that would be just a foundational defensive line class moving forward. But it's not just with those guys in the interior, right? They have 2 in the interior. They probably need 2. They need 2 more. I think you can get this thing done in an elite way with 2 more easy steps. But then there's also the Richard Wesleys of the world. I'll have a note about Jaraylen McCoy. I'm not sure if Texas is, I've kind of heard some interesting stuff about that guy, but they're after a bunch of these dudes. And you mentioned in the upcoming weeks, I know that we have Vodney Cleveland coming in this weekend. He's from Birmingham, Alabama, right?
Vodney is from, I think, Fort Myers.
Okay.
No, yeah, you're right. Sorry, Birmingham. Gervell is from Fort Myers. My bad. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but they're also like Gervell. Like, who else? Like, as far as like, what is the schedule as far as these guys coming in?
So the defensive tackles, Corey Wells and Dylan Barryman, the only 2 that have been in so far, next to Lamar Brown, were in last weekend. Damari Simeon, Vodney Cleveland are going to be in this weekend. Damari Simeon is from Richland, New Jersey. He was offered, I think, just maybe a month ago. Yeah, he had unofficial on April 11th, and he was offered earlier this last winter. And then Kendall Gervale from Fort Myers, he'll be in this weekend as well.
Okay, so
Gervale's next weekend. My bad.
Okay, so anybody else on that Gervale weekend?
As far as overall defensive line, or just D tackle?
Both.
Well, just D tackle, it's just him. Defensive line, Luke Waffle, who's one of the top players in America. He's my number 1 ranked defensive end personally. And then the only other defensive lineman is Richard Wesley, the 6.1 5-star on Rivals that was formerly committed to Oregon. Those are the 3 defensive linemen currently slated to be in on the 20th.
It feels like it's going to be hard to afford both Lamar Brown and Richard Wesley.
Yes.
but dude, I think that, okay, so whenever you look at what Texas has on board right now, right? Okay, so just looking at strictly at the interior defensive line. So 2 seniors for the 2025 team. That's the Purdue transfer Cole Brevard, the North Carolina transfer Travis Shaw. Brevard gets talked about like he's one of the more solid. They say he's the best defensive lineman that Texas has now. Now this is without seeing Murad Watson yet, who we'll talk about in just 1 second. Travis Shaw was held back through spring because they said they were monitoring his knee for they didn't want to re-aggravate some previous knee injuries that he had during his time at UNC. But we do know that he has that upside of a former 5-star guy and flashes the traits. But I don't think as of right now you can just chalk it up to where it's just an inevitability that he's going to become the guy that everybody had really hoped. He certainly still could, right? But regardless, both those guys are gone after next year. As far as the juniors, that's Hero Canoe from Ohio State, sort of similar to Shaw, high recruiting pedigree, great athleticism, but has been on a slow development curve. And we talked about it yesterday about how the core of this defensive line room is going to come, moving forward through the sophomores and depending on what Justice Terry's body does as a freshman. Probably Alex January, Murad Watson, and Justice Terry. You look to be kind of the three musketeers there, barring any any more defensive line transfer stuff that happens in 2026, which we could see. But those guys, those are Justice Terry, one of your most expensive NIL guys. Alex January, big, long arm dude. He's only played 80 snaps, and so he's just right there. Super green, but certainly has the body to where you think that he could, he's going to be Alex January through 2025, I'm sure is going to be a guy who we see as maybe like the fourth defensive tackle, maybe third. And those guys play
He needs to be the third.
Those guys play a lot. If he's the third, he's going to play as much as Lole played last year. So it's you figure those three, and then if we can get some, and just looking to 2026, because we're talking about the 2026 class, right, and how it fits in, how it can be foundational, how we can talk about it being one of the best in the whole nation. You think to yourself, okay, between the other sophomore, Levon Johnson, who's the transfer from Maryland, but if we could see somebody between him, Melvin Hills, maybe Lance Jackson getting big enough to bump in, although he's going to have his plate full this season. It looks like he's going to have to play he's probably going to be the number 2 defensive end behind Ethan Burke. Hills, Josiah Sharma, Myron Charles. If we can get a surprise Canoe, if we can get a surprise contributor out of Canoe, Johnson, Hills, Sharma, Charles, you figure that those would kind of be your core 4 coming into next season. And so what does that mean? It's like, all right, well, those guys have high upside. Maybe more than one of those guys can pop off through 2025. But just to get to a spot where you don't need to get 5 transfer defensive linemen next season, right? If you look at what they've already done with Dylan Barryman and Corey Wells, you have a guy in Barryman who I went and watched him a bunch more. There are plays where he affects the quarterback in his puddle highlights. But whenever I look at him, dude, I see a guy that's like 6'2", that's like a fire plug. He's really hard to move. It's like and this is the feedback that I've gotten from people in the know. It's like he's going to be really good in the middle of your defense, splitting double teams, fitting up the run, standing his ground, and most importantly, just kind of holding it, like resetting the line of scrimmage. But more of in a run aspect, because I just don't see his feet, his change of direction, his agility being good enough to where he's going to be one of these interior B gap penetrators. And that's what you really need from a dominant defensive front. You need some guys that have that in their tool bag. Now, if you look at Corey Wells, he's thought of more highly than Dylan Barryman among some people. And we've talked about his pad level. He's taller. He's a different kind of body, right? But as I watched him out there, man, this guy is like, if we're talking about a guy who might be able to be more of a B-gap penetrator, I would say it would be Wells, because when he gets off his blocks, he can actually cover ground pretty fast to the ball carrier, and maybe that could translate to the quarterback as well. But to me, he seems more suited to, I think both these guys are going to be good versus the run. I think that's kind of the deal. And so if you want to get more of a diversity of skill sets with these players, and you want to get a group that has 4 to 5 guys, the 2 guys I've identified that just have the skill sets where you can see it in their feet and you can see it in their athleticism and their violence in their get off and their violence in their hands, and they don't look muscle bound, they don't look stiff, they don't look sloppy. Instead, they look flexible and they look like they have been to them. If you add Lamar Brown and Vodney Cleveland into this interior D line group, you have a group of guys that have different, not completely different skill sets, but who have traits that run the entire gamut of everything that you want, which wouldn't be like any class that they've had. I mean, I think that the 2025 class was a good class, especially with Justice Terry there at the very top. But, Justice Terry comes in weighing 262 pounds. He's going to need a year till he can be even a guy that's the size of a Walter Nolan from last year, and he was considered undersized himself. This would be a group that I think would be foundational moving forward. And we would look back at it and say like that, like as the defense came along and continued to improve, that infusion of talent in 2024, that they're already halfway there with these two guys. I think if they can just land these two more, and I think it's Vodney Cleveland and it's Lamar Brown, that would be. I'm going to ask you, like, if you think that would have a chance if they do land one of these they added Jamarian Carlton, would that be one of these deals where you would consider it? All right, that is possibly tops in the country. And I'm going to ask you right after we hear from our good friends over at Specs.
Texans know for selection and lower prices, it all starts at Specs.
Shop Specs!
No matter what's on the menu, we've got you covered. With all your favorites on tap, you'll bring home the win.
Shop Specs!
Special occasion? Flirt responsibly. Boots on, drinks up. The fun starts here.
Shop Specs, low priced, amazing. Here's to you. Shop. Cheers to savings.
It's Football with Friends. I'm Alex Dunlap. He is Cody Carpentier. You can find us on X at Alex Dunlap NFL, at Cody Carpentier. Of course, we're brought to you by our presenting sponsor, the Man Eye Institute. See life better. Make sure and give them a phone call today for all your LASIK needs, all your vision needs, anything that you need. If it has to do with your eyes, man, they can help you out at the Man Eye Institute. 1-844-WOW-2020. Thanks so much to Man Eye Institute for being the presenting sponsor of Football with Friends here on Orange Bloods Live. Also, thanks to Texas Beef Traders right there in Lakeway, right off of Loman's Crossing and 620. Go get 10% off the best beef that you can get in all of Texas, and the best people, the best ranchers. Support local ranches, support local businesses. Go to Texas Beef Traders or go to texasbeeftraders.com. And, of course, thanks to Poncho Outdoors for gearing us up with such awesome clothes. Cody, there you go. Cody wearing a Poncho shirt. So after I went on the whole diatribe there, what are you thinking?
I think you nailed it right on the head. And the Lamar Brown side of this would allow you to only take 4. And I say only in context of what it is. It allows you to take 4 because, and the two names you listed, right? Vodney Cleveland and Lamar Brown, total dogs. Right now, Lamar Brown listed as an athlete, but if he was listed as a defensive tackle, he'd be the highest ranking defensive tackle in America right now, ahead of Richard Anderson from Louisiana. So Lamar Brown, de facto DT1. Vodney Cleveland, DT5 on Rivals right now. Dylan Barryman, DT10 on Rivals right now. Corey Wells a little bit further down there. That's a really, really, really strong 4 dudes. And, the lean right now would seem to be telling you that Lamar Brown and Vodney Cleveland are leaning that direction. Even Kendall Gurvale out of Fort Myers is a guy that's outspoken that Texas is leading right now. So, he could potentially be a 5th, but it's not even that you need a 5th. It's, yes, a 5th would be awesome, especially in this defensive line room that, like you said, is going to lose a Travis Shaw and a Brevard. And who knows what that looks like with, the portal next year, who leaves, who stays, things like retention and stuff. And like you said, they added 5 dudes this last year in the defensive tackle room. If you can add 5 in the recruiting class, and you can look a year from now at your freshman, sophomore class as 8 dudes, like you said, that's like a generational shift change. That's like a multi-decade shift change in how recruiting looks at that position. And it kind of reminds me this year of what we saw last year at the wide receiver and tight end position. Wide receiver 2, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 18, tight end 7 as your top 4 dudes. You also added in tight end 28 in America. It's a little underrated for my 2 cents for Amari Winston there. But a bulk of dudes to finish in. Why? Because you've had players drafted year over year over year in that wide receiver room, and it kind of gets drained. Defensive tackle, it's like year over year over year, and it kind of gets a little bit drained. And yeah, you got to go to the portal, but you can replenish it, and kind of like what we saw this last year with Jamie French and Dalen McCutcheon and Kalik Lockett. Like, you're replenishing in that room, and
Terry
and Michael Terry, and
Yeah.
like, exactly. And I didn't even count Michael Terry in those numbers, and he was one of the top athletes in America. So I think those numbers can replenish it, as they will at defensive tackle. And we didn't even get to like the defensive end and edge. You mentioned Jamarian Carlton, who we talked about at the top of the hour, who's a lean to Texas now. You look at like the edge in the defensive end room, who Ethan Burke, Trey Moore are going to be gone next year. Yes, Colin Simmons is there, but he's only going to be there for one more year. You're going to need to hit there as well. And all the guys that they've had in the last week and will have in the next 2 weeks. You're talking about the number 1, 4, and 6 defensive ends in America on the edge position. And that's Richard Wesley, Bryce Perry Wright, and Luke Waffle. Wesley and Waffle not really favorites right now to beat Texas. They're more in the Oregon and Penn State conversations. But at edge, it's like everyone knows the name Drake Quinn, the edge rusher, Xavier Griffin. Like, these are top 15.
Xavier Griffin. I mean, that
potentially like an Ant Hill type of situation.
Yeah, man. And but I mean, that's one where, I mean, if some people feel pretty good about that recruitment.
Yeah,
as far as Texas is concerned.
And like, he's listed as an edge. So it's like, when you talk about the whole D line and you talk about building the best defensive line class in America, and all we hear a lot about Lee Allen Clark with all these guys. We hear a lot about, the utilization of Colin Simmons and Justice Terry on these recruiting visits. You also have to think back to the last 2 years of who'd they get. They got Justice Terry. They got a Lance Jackson, a 5-star. They got a Colin Simmons, a 5-star. Like, this is a good room that can only continue to get better. And this class right here, defensive tackle, defensive end, and edge, has a chance to add 7 or 8 dudes that are absolutely dogs, and all of them could be ranked in the top 15. Again, rankings, but they could all be ranked in the top 15, mostly in the top 10 across platforms. And it has a chance to, like I said, be the best defensive line class in America.
He's Cody Carpentier. I'm Alex Dunlap. This is Football with Friends here on Orange Bloods Live. Please like the show, subscribe to the channel. We're here every night, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. So make sure and come check us out. Share the show with a friend if you would. And if it's your first time watching it, just come back tomorrow, man. We love you guys. Thank you very much. God bless you. For Cody, I'm Alex. We're done.